Our next brave speaker this evening is Dr. Judy Singer. Judy is an Australian sociologist, a writer, a public speaker, and a disability activist. She is internationally recognized as being the pioneer of the global neurodiversity movement. In fact, she coined the term neurodiversity. Many of us owe her a great gratitude for bringing to the forefront of her work something that empowers millions. Judy tells me that while she went to medical school, she never completed her studies, but she was recently made a doctorate honoris causa. Judy Singer. So thank you for coming and speaking with us this evening. I thought the best place to start is always at the beginning. And your beginning is, while familiar to a lot of people, quite different. Many people in the room and in our community can relate to growing up in a house with Holocaust survivors for parents. Your story was slightly different, however. Can you share with us a bit about your upbringing, why your story is different, and maybe start from Hungary?
Okay. Well, even in Hungary, we left as refugees in '56. It began with my mother. There was something about my mother. And from the beginning, I thought it was as if she came from, I don't know how I articulated this at that time, but she was, being a Holocaust survivor, obviously, she was suffering from PTSD, but also she was eccentric in ways that I had never seen before. And when we came to Australia, I was always trying to find out, why is she so different from everyone else? And when I was 15, I went to the library and went to the psychiatry books and looked through them all and thought nothing about my mother. So I thought, well, maybe she's just a bad, lazy person. And that's what I thought. So, excuse me, she was unable to get a job because of her eccentricity. She applied for hundreds and hundreds, literally, and she was traumatized by it. And people interpreted that as, oh, she went to university, so she's giving herself airs and graces. It wasn't like that. So my father had to work really hard because she was really incapable of doing any of the jobs that women were supposed to do, for which I hardly blame her looking back.
What did that mean for you growing up? What was it like in your household?
Well, for a start, I was my mother's social translator. So I was always rescuing her from situations because she was extremely naive about people's intentions. There was constant trauma, as I've already said, because of her inability to get jobs. And we were poor. My father was just the most wonderful man. He worked so hard. He helped everybody out. He was never really able to learn English, so he ended up just labouring. So we were constantly at the bottom of the heap and watching everybody else become successful. And we were sort of the poor cousins, and it was horrible. And there was tension at home, and I was taught to lie for my mother and pretend that she was the housewife, where actually my dad did everything, that sort of thing.
Judy, what did that mean for you growing up? So you mentioned to me before that you've had many challenges in your life, challenges that affect almost every aspect. And starting there, how did that define who you are now and the work that you do?
Well, I don't know. I guess it was like life put me out on the edge of a plank, and I could cling there forever, or I could jump. And I often think that's what I did. And the challenges that I faced are not unfamiliar to many people. I mean, we now know that what's known as the autistic spectrum is quite common for women, even not diagnosed. The other things of intersectionality, like female, this is in the 60s, not that much opportunity for women, especially brainy women. You just had to hide it. Gender, poverty, or, bottom socioeconomic percentile. Yeah. So did I miss something? Oh, ethnicity, obviously. Yeah.
And your work towards the neurodiversity movement, so people don't know that I mentioned before, she's the originator of the term neurodiversity. How did your own struggles and your background lead you to pioneering this movement? And maybe we can start by defining what neurodiversity actually is.
Oh, okay. So I've got to apologise for this horrible term that nobody quite understands. And I have to say that I actually just had an aha moment and thought, oh, what a perfect word, never thinking twice about what it even meant. And it was a perfect word for the times because it combined the fashions of the time, which was the rise of neuroscience over psychology. People were fed up with paying fortunes for therapy and not changing. Neuroscience seemed to improve. And the green movement, diversity as a desirable thing for any ecosystem, and I thought, why not put them together? Actually, I didn't think that, but obviously deep down in my intuition, it was like, yep, it just fits the times. So what does it mean? It means, well, it's a fancy word for all humanity, but don't tell anyone that because... But what it doesn't mean is it's not a disability. So I noticed that when what they wrote about me, that I was going to talk about my neurodiversity, and I've got a very bad case of neurodiversity. No, it's like, Joey the kangaroo's got a bad case of biodiversity. No, it doesn't mean disability. But basically, I didn't define it, but I said what it was for. I wanted to name a social movement for in the mould of the women's liberation movement and the gay liberation movement, for people who were neurological outsiders or neurological minorities, as I prefer to call them now. And the other, that was to name the movement, and the other thing was to add to intersectionality, because in those days, disability was just physical, intellectual, and mental illness, and that wasn't us. We just didn't belong. We were bunched into mental illness or weird or oddballs or eggheads. And it also, so I went to university at the time. Tell me if I'm going off the topic. I went to university at the time, and I was searching for what is it that my mother had, because I knew there was something. And meanwhile, I had my daughter, and she was reminding me of my mother, and I thought, oh my God, it's a hereditary disability. What is it? So I was searching around at university, and I stumbled on disability studies. It just totally blew my mind. And I pursued it, and I kept looking. And I ended up doing an honours degree at UTS. And I did it on autistics communicating in cyberspace. And I called it the birth of something like the evolution of a new social movement based on neurological diversity. And then I just put them together because it was catchy. And it fooled you all.
Judy, looking back at the past now, do you think a movement like neurodiversity would have made your life different growing up? And do you think you're making the world a different place for your daughter to grow up in?
Well, interesting you asked that, because my actual first thought was that I don't want any child to go through what I went through with my mother. And I think the world would have been different from my mother, because she was under this constant pressure. She was a very cosmopolitan woman from Budapest in a tropical hellhole, Brisbane. And yeah, we all felt that way. And she would have been different. And so I've got to say that there was a happy ending. I started the world's first support group for people raised by autistic parents, and it helped us to come to terms with, well, this is what they were, and we were beginning to understand it. So my hope is that people will get the accommodations, the understanding, the respect and the accommodations. And I must say she got it at the Montefiore home, where she just absolutely blossomed. because everybody loved her. She didn't have to pretend anymore, and antidepressants, which we're all on.
Yeah.
What? Isn't everybody?
I have to ask, again, looking into the past, if you could go back and that young girl who went through all those struggles and you could speak to your younger self, what would you tell her now?
Move to Melbourne immediately. Oh, really? It's true though. Brisbane, I didn't have a Jewish community, and I was an outsider in so many ways, an outsider amongst outsiders. And I wanted my parents to move, but they just couldn't get it together.
Judy, thank you so much for your time and your honesty tonight. I know that in your spare time or for your work, sometimes your voice is the only value that you can bring, and for people living with a disability or people with mental health, sometimes that voice is the value that they bring. And so I want to use this opportunity, if someone in the audience or they knew someone that wanted to get in touch with you and speak to you about neurodiversity and in a consulting capacity, how would they do that?
Oh, okay. But actually, if you don't mind, I'd rather have a billionaire patron, like... No, and then I can write my life story. I promise it'll be a bestseller.
Well, you can come find me afterwards if you want that information. Thank you, Judy.